Have you seen the movie Raymond, where the main character is on the spectrum? Well, I'm not that extreme, but I do have Asperger's syndrome. For the most part, I'm just like everyone else, just with a few quirks, okay, maybe more than a few quirks. People with Asperger's struggle with social cues. While most people know it's time to stop talking when someone yawns, it's not so obvious to us. We're logical and detail-oriented, and you may know someone like us, maybe a tech geek or a smart guy from the Big Bang Theory. I'm fussy about things and not very expressive. I find it hard to make eye contact, so I often look at mouths or noses. Instead, I excel in school because I'm a stickler for rules, given clear tasks and goals. I make a great employee, but when it comes to I was always in trouble in school, mostly because I never went on dates in high school because I couldn't understand all the games girls played with guys' heads. Instead, I just read everything I could find. Grandpa, being a practical man and an old Navy man, bought me a 4003 for my 18th birthday. I enjoyed the gift like any teenage boy and made a standing arrangement with the young lady whenever I had the means to afford her charms. My first great romance began with an unexpected situation. I was getting gas at the mall before starting my Meals on Wheels route for the elderly. It wasn't because I'm super nice. It was part of a scholarship requirement. I chose Meals on Wheels because I could do it on my own, but as I got into it, I found the seniors really interesting. These people had been through a lot, surviving the Great Depression and shaping the history of our country. They were like living history books, and I could ask them questions, which made it even better. They were happy to share their stories with anyone who would listen. So there I was paying for my gas when a girl walked by being chased by two guys, one tall and one short. Suddenly the girl jumped into my car and locked the doors. The two guys kept yelling and banging on my car. The store clerk was already on the phone with 911. I went over and yelled, "Hey, get away from my car!" The shorter guy demanded that I open the car. "I'm not going to do that," I replied firmly. "We'll wait for the police. I'll need a report from my insurance, and I'll need your information because you both damaged the car. It belonged to my grandmother and was in perfect condition. I washed it every Saturday with premium wax called Mother Shut Up." The bigger guy, Jeff, cut in. Then he pointed at himself. "The cops are already here, so unlock that junk now." I looked at Mutt and Jeff. They didn't have uniforms or badges. "Can I see some ID or a badge, please?" Mutt stepped closer. "We don't have time for this," he muttered to Jeff. Then he grabbed my arm and tried to twist it. I should mention that I took up martial arts to improve my coordination and confidence, which really helps me handle situations like this. They drilled a rule into me: no reaction unless someone physically touched me. I actually liked that rule because I didn't like being touched. It fit my black and white Asperger's view of the world, so I could ignore words, but respond to physical actions. I spent 3 Saturdays a week at the local Ido place, so much so that it felt like a second home back in the present. Mutt was shocked when I countered his arm lock with a move I'd practiced 1,000,000 times in Ido classes for over a decade. When I stood up, I said, "You touched me first. Please don't do that again." Then the girl in the car yelled a warning as Jeff charged me. I thought this was like my last belt test. I used a move to throw him into a gas pump. The girl laughed at them. "You two can't even handle a chubby kid. You better bring more buddies before you get hurt." I didn't laugh. The boys showed no signs of stopping. Jeff quickly got up with a stun gun. When he tried to use it, I threw his hand into a bucket of windshield wiper fluid, causing the electricity to shock him badly. I then dodged Mutt's baton and countered with a squeegee, tripping him with its handle. The girl stopped laughing when Mutt pulled out a magnum and told me to freeze. During our training, we often practice tool defense with the motto, "Run from a knife, run from a magnum." The idea was to close the distance, because a magnum is more dangerous from a distance than a knife. I rolled closer to Mutt because people often aim high. At that moment, Mutt did it twice, shattering my car window. The girl screamed. I caught Mutt off guard and quickly disarmed him by controlling his wrist with a right elbow. Then a police car appeared with sirens blaring. The cops ordered me to drop the tool. I did, but then someone knocked me down and Mutt jumped on me. I blacked out. I ended up in a cell for over a day. No phone call. No rights read, it turned out. Mutt and Jeff were the cops who later insulted me while I was restrained. Other inmates left me alone, apparently impressed. I'd stood up to 2 cops. On the second day, the prison staff who had been ignoring me suddenly became nervous. Someone went out of their way to say they were treating me like any other suspect and had nothing to do with what was happening. Before I got there, Anthony, the jailer, called out to open my cell door. "Come with me." As I walked out, I was surprised to see the girl from my car and an older man waiting for me. The jailer seemed uncomfortable as he led me to them. "Here you go, Your Honor, he's in good shape." Like I said, we kept him safe. The judge didn't respond to the jailer, but examined my face, focusing on a bruise from when Jeff hit me with a phone book. The girl started taking pictures with her cell phone. "He looks really safe to me. How many of you brave boys did it take?" She looked at the bruises on my wrists from beating up a handcuffed man. "Huh," the judge waved her off. "That's enough." Then he turned to me. "Lead and go, son. We're going to shake things up with this." The judge walked away, and the girl and I followed. We sat outside the Metro Police Commissioner's office and watched busy men in suits go in and out with papers. The judge hadn't come out since he went in. "Would you like a drink?" asked the commissioner's administrative assistant. "Yes, I'll have some watermelon juice." I said, "Watermelon juice?" She seemed surprised. "You said something," I reminded her. "We only have soda, tea, or coffee." "Sorry," she clarified. "Oh, so you didn't mean anything, just soda, tea, or coffee." "That's confusing," I remarked, and the girl interjected. "We'll both have soda." "Any kind is fine, thank you." She pulled me to a chair. "Relax, dude. Are you always this uptight?" I don't know what uptight means, but I was just trying to help her communicate more clearly. I explained that miscommunication can cause problems in 6007. "Okay, you're a little quirky," she interrupted, but in a cute way. "Don't you want to know what happened after the cops showed up at the gas station?" "I suppose you want to tell me. Isn't that why you're here?" I replied, and she rolled her eyes. "Well, first of all, my name is Dawn." I pointed at her badge, but it says New Dawn. "Yeah, my parents were into crystals and stuff, so technically it's New Dawn, but call me Dawn." "Okay, can I call you Tony?" "You can, but I won't answer to Tony because my name is Anthony." "All right, Anthony, it is." I ran because those 2 guys tried to arrest me for shoplifting. "Were you actually shoplifting?" Dawn gave me a serious look like a big store cares about little things. "Do you know how little they pay in taxes and how little they pay their workers, not to mention child labor overseas? What does that have to do with you taking stuff out of the store?" "It's a franchise. So technically you were stealing from the owner, not the big corporation." Whatever, Dawn waved it off. Don't you think the whole police department is corrupt? Look at those 2 idiots that attacked you. They were an exception. I said. Dawn looked puzzled. And what an exception? In any large organization, most people do their jobs well. Then there's a small percentage who excel a little bit more, who are corrupt, and a tiny fraction who just coast. These 2 were just part of the tiny bad bunch. I raised 2 fingers. I had the misfortune to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. If it had been a little earlier or later, I would have avoided them. And those 2 cops. They're not typical. Dawn tried to speak, but I gestured to stop her. The average income of a cop is pretty normal. Nowhere near rich. They just enforce the law. If you don't like the law, change it or vote for someone who will. Don't blame those who enforce it. That's all I have to say. Now tell me what happened next. Dawn shook her head. You're something else. When the other cop showed up, I slipped out of your car and hid in the gas station. I saw the 2 cops grab the security footage and threaten the clerk. She held up her phone, but I was recording everything from the beginning. You didn't know they didn't even identify themselves as cops. They were just chasing you. I got everything, even her threats to the clerk. Then I saw the Meals on Wheels stuff in your car. So I called her and said, "Send the lawyers tools and money." She looked at the commissioner's door. "Did you know that the judge runs Meals on Wheels?" I nodded. "Yes, and he's the biggest judge in the county and the top dog in state politics. He even spoke at my high school graduation." Dawn's eyes widened. That makes sense. After I called Meals on Wheels, a bunch of state troopers showed up at the gas station. They took your car, grabbed the clerk and me, and took us to the judge's office. He was furious when he saw the footage on my phone. It was like a royal court in there. People showed up quickly, even though it was late. People in fancy clothes, all kinds of people helping to find you. She touched the bruise on my face. Those 2 idiots wanted to bury you in paperwork. Wait until your bruises fade. Then say it was your word against theirs. They even planted pills in your car. Just then the admin lady got a call and hung up. She spoke to me. "Anthony, His Honor would like to see you in his office." The police commissioner was relieved to get rid of them, especially since they had a history of complaints. They were caught working mall security while on Metro PD duty, which sealed their fate. Other officers involved were reprimanded. The commissioner, and the judge owed me a favor. They were surprised when I asked them not to punish anyone else. These officers had just trusted Mutt and Jeff Story and believed that I was part of a gang. I received a substantial payout from Metro. I'm not one for luxury, but I took the money because I knew a jury wouldn't like the way I was treated. A week later, Don came by and let me go. "Anthony." Don said he was looking at my place. "Heard you got your check time." To celebrate, I looked around my simple place. "It's not fancy, but it's home anyway," Don replied. "We're going out on the town tonight." "I can't eat any of this," Don declared, slamming down the menu. We were at one of the best steakhouses in town, a place my grandparents reserved for special occasions when we could afford it. They served the best beef, and when in season, crab or lobster peeked over the menu. I asked Dawn what was wrong with Vo's choice of meat. She gave me a disgusted look. "I'm a vegetarian," she said, pointing at the menu. "Is there anything here that doesn't have a brutal ending?" "You're a vegetarian," I said, surprised. "Yes," she confirmed. I remembered something my grandfather once said. "You know, Don, the original meaning of vegetarian is poor." "Hunter." Dawn jabbed her finger at me. "You're clueless." Nature didn't make us for hamburgers. I countered with another of Grandpa's quotes. If nature didn't want us to eat hamburgers, why did she make cows so easy to catch? Ever heard of cheetah burgers? Dawn seemed irritated. Humans weren't meant to eat meat. Our ancestors lived on wild grains, fruits, and vegetables. I gave her a confused look, but we don't live in caves anymore. Back then, people barely made it to 20, while cave dwellers lasted a full 25 years. She waved me off. No one realizes that ancient hunters were only successful about 10% of the time. Hunting was risky, easy to break bones, twist ankles, no medical help. Without plants, they'd starve. Dawn, you're afraid of spiders. I can't imagine you munching on termites. She grimaced at you, Anthony Gross. I clenched my hands. The cavemen got their protein from insects. Termites were a hit, being 38% protein. Some Venezuelan ones are 64% protein, and they're also loaded with iron, calcium, and amino acids like tryptophan. Dawn brushed it off as she flipped through the menu. We need to get back to basics, like our ancestors. None of this factory farm nonsense was on my menu. I went on, so let's not use penicillin or antibiotics. Do surgery without anesthesia. Go back to the days when childbirth was the leading cause of death for women. No, Dawn replied, we need to be more self-sufficient. She gestured around the crowded room. It really bothers me to see what everyone else is eating. I tried to understand her point of view, but it seemed a little unreasonable. Dawn, getting upset about what others eat is like getting upset about someone eating a donut when you're on a diet. Dawn chuckled and put her menu on the table. I'll have a salad, but dessert is on me. Are you sure? I asked and showed her the dessert options on the menu. Today's special is homemade key lime pie with whipped cream. I can't think of a better choice for dessert. Well, I was wrong. Dawn's dessert idea was much better than the key lime pie plus. I wasn't used to having key lime pie 3 times in one evening. You haven't been in many relationships, have you? Dawn asked, snuggling up to me as we lay naked on my bed. I held up a finger. Dawn looked at it. That's okay. I've only had 3 serious relationships myself, but I've been close more than once. I protested, thinking of my escort girlfriend. Oh, you mean intimacy? Dawn exclaimed. That's different. I've had it with more than 3 guys. How many have I asked? I don't remember. She replied, looking at the ceiling. It's not like I sleep with a guy every month. That's okay. If you can't remember, I can do the math. I offered you to start at 17. Right, that's the average age, isn't it? Dawn hesitated. Sure, Leighton, go with 17. I began to crunch the numbers. If you had a partner every other month for 5 years, that's 30 men. That's a lot. Taking a moment, I added, I don't even think I know 30 guys. Dawn threw a pillow at me. That can't be right. Well, on average, women have 23. 9 partners before marriage, although most claim to have fewer than 10. The average age of a bride today is 29. So your behavior would be considered one. 25 times more promiscuous than average at your age and current pace. You would have been intimate with over 70 men before marriage. That's way above average. I looked at her. Would you describe yourself as a 4003? Dawn gave me a sharp look. Are you calling me a 4003? We just got close, and now you're calling me a 4003. I was confused. I'm sorry, I didn't call you that. I just asked a question. You seem upset, and I didn't want to upset you. I tried to explain my condition over dinner. I struggled to understand the emotional cues that most people pick up. Of course, my obliviousness often leads to misunderstandings, and I never know exactly where I went wrong. Dawn relaxed and traced her finger across my chest. "That's okay, Anthony. I'm not a 4003. She began to move her head down my body. "But I can be your 43. It seemed logical that if Dawn was my girlfriend, she should live with me, so we needed a bigger place than my small apartment. Fortunately, the payout from Metro allowed me to afford a bigger place. Money wasn't a big deal to me, but Dawn enjoyed the comforts it provided. I studied math and accounting. I love math, but Grandpa said I should have a practical skill, and people always needed accountants. I wasn't sure what Dawn was studying at school. She was always involved in some rally or protest on campus, whether it was Gays for the Metric System, Indigenous Muppet Rights, or stopping condom testing on animals. I couldn't keep track of them all, but Dawn thrived on every March. But if it made her happy, it made me happy, and speaking of happy, I was determined to please Dawn in bed. So I did what I always did and researched everything about female pleasure. I scoured internet forums, magazine articles, videos, and best-selling books. I even paid for a session with my escort friend to get some advice, and no, I didn't do anything with her. I had a girlfriend. "Well, wow," Dawn exclaimed. Her face flushed as she fell back onto the bed. "Where did you find this?" I put the toy back in the bedside drawer before answering. "The clerk at the Pleasure Palace recommended it. She even gave me a demonstration in the back room on how to use it properly. According to my research, it's one of the top-rated models." Dawn stared at me for a moment before bursting into laughter. "You're the only guy who can watch a stranger do things and call it research with a straight face, and I believe you." Dawn got pregnant, which surprised me, not because she was expecting, but because it didn't fit into the timeline of our relationship. Dawn didn't seem to mind that we were deviating from the usual path of dating, living together, getting married, then having kids. It took me 2 weeks to convince Dawn of my reasoning and get her to the courthouse. That year was special because 2 wonderful things happened. Dawn married me and, most importantly, our daughter was born. The birth of our daughter sparked our first real fight. Dawn wanted to have a home birth with a midwife. I don't want our daughter to be born in a hospital full of sick people. She said I want her to come into the world in a place of love, near her future bedroom and the kitchen where she'll grow up. You hardly cook in the kitchen, and yet you want to give birth there. I countered with a baby girl in my life. Everything felt wonderful. I dove into researching proper parenting techniques, seeking advice from child psychologists and experts at the university. Dawn became frustrated with my constant corrections to her parenting. Eventually, she let me do most of the parenting. It's not that she wasn't a good mother. She just got tired of me taking our daughter to the zoo, concerts, the aquarium, and so on. I felt it was my duty to expose my baby to new experiences while Dawn stayed busy with her campus activities. The next 10 years flew by. After earning my Ph.D., I found myself working on Wall Street. A top player at a large hedge fund was looking for talent in various fields such as math, physics, and engineering. He was looking for brainiacs who could make 2 + 2 = 5. To use Ailes' metaphor, it was like solving a giant 3-dimensional puzzle on Wall Street. The way the rules were set up, we could make 2 + 2 = 9. While we raked in hefty paychecks for this Rubik's Cube math, I wasn't driven by money. As the saying goes, the poor want to be rich. The rich want to be kings, and kings are never satisfied. but the Wall Street game felt rigged to me. Still, if the money made my family happy, I was content. I never thought Dawn would cheat on me. We both had late nights, but Dawn threw herself into activism, now focused on saving the environment. For a while, she was passionate about saving endangered animals. You know, Anthony, humans are the reason whales are almost extinct. You're the most dangerous predator of the blue whale, Dawn. That's partly true, but they're the largest mammals on Earth. What do other predators do? Blue whales have pelicans with machine tool lions on jet skis. I was also puzzled by your views on climate change. Dawn, do you find it ironic to drive an Escalade to a Save the Planet rally? She gave me a puzzled look. Anthony, it's a hybrid. It's very fuel efficient. If I stop for more than a few seconds, the engine shuts off to save fuel. Well, my grandfather had a car like this years ago. I replied, pulling up a web page on my laptop. But consider the resources used to make your Escalade and dispose of the hybrid battery. It leaves a carbon footprint as big as Bigfoot. Dawn threw up his hands before answering. You want your wife and kid to drive around in a Volkswagen Jetta. Well, they're one of the safest cars, and the diesel model gets much better gas mileage than your SUV Hybrid Plus. We hardly ever argued. I didn't see the point, but I couldn't understand why Dawn needed so much stuff. She'd buy these ugly clothes with designer labels and always say it looked so much better on her. I'd think about what was going on, but I kept quiet. When they gave birth to our son, I was ecstatic. I don't know who was happier with the new addition, his big sister or me. But a few years later, the housing market crashed, and that's when things went downhill, at least for Dad. Like most Americans, I didn't get a government bailout. Those were reserved for CEOs and large financial institutions deemed too big to fail. I ended up in a small-town bank in the South, far from Wall Street. My salary was a fraction of what I used to make, and our house was underwater. As soon as we bought it, gone were the European vacations. Private clubs, private schools, spas, tutors, Cadillac escalators, and Starbucks were a thing of the past. I was proud of how my children were adjusting. My daughter loved her public school, and my son was thrilled to have a big yard to play in. My job at the small bank wasn't as demanding as Wall Street, but the people were friendly. But even I could see that Dawn wasn't happy. I didn't realize how unhappy she was until I walked into our bedroom 8 months after we moved and saw her packing clothes into a suitcase. Dawn, it looks like you're packing for a trip. I don't get a vacation until I've been at the bank for a year. Dawn grabbed another suitcase from the closet. They need me in Manhattan. Anthony, I'm going to help with the Occupy Wall Street protest. Dawn, we can't leave now. It's the middle of the school year. I just finished my probationary period at work and our bank accounts are pretty low. Dawn continued to fold her clothes. I don't care. Occupy Wall Street is a big deal. They need me. I'll only be gone a couple of weeks. Dawn, we need you here. What about our kids? Don't be such a baby, Anthony. Our daughter can look after herself after school until you get home. I arranged for Janet, the bank teller with the boy our boy's age, to have her babysitter watch both her boy and ours until you pick him up. Dawn turned to me. Military families have to deal with long separations when soldiers are deployed. Dawn, you're not a soldier. There's no war, and Occupy Wall Street is not a battle. No one called you. Dawn waved me off. Anthony, they need me. It's my calling to lead them. Dawn, you can't lead from a crowd. Dr. Gono, a well-known psychologist, has shown that being part of a like-minded group activates the pleasure centers of the brain. If you let others do your thinking, it's time to move on. Dawn slammed her suitcase shut. Don't argue with me, Anthony, you won't win. I sat down and tried to reason with her. Even in a marriage, one spouse can win if they push far enough. It's called divorce. She turned away from her suitcase. We're not going to be one of those 50% of marriages that end in divorce. Well, Dawn, the other 50% end in death, as until death do us part. I tried to explain the practical problems with her trip. The tires on your car won't make it to New York. I was going to replace them next payday. Dawn grabbed her suitcases. I'm not taking the car. I'm getting a ride from a guy I met online who blogs about the movement. And how are you going to pay for that? We can barely cover our expenses this month, Dawn shrugged. He said for the first time we could figure something out. I didn't have any answers. I sat there stunned and didn't even hear the car that took Dawn away. I know she didn't even kiss her children goodbye. I couldn't understand why Dawn had left. I told the children's mom she was at a rally up north, but I didn't know when she'd be back. The media had a field day when they found out that an Occupy Wall Street protester was married to a banker. They called Dawn Ackham. Even in our small town, it caused problems. Dad. My son asked, "What's a hoe?" A hoe is like a garden rake. I explained and he looked confused. Why are the kids at school saying Mom is a garden rake? Then my daughter came in. It's hoe, not hoe, you know, like 4003. My son turned to me and said, "What's a 4003? And why do they say Mom is one? Your mom is not a 4003, and that's a bad word. Go play outside until dinner." I told him after he left. My daughter sat heavily on a chair. "Dad, you have to stop this, Mom. She's ruining my reputation at school. People are saying horrible things." I comforted her. We can't control what people say, and honestly, they probably don't think much of us. "Dad," she explained dramatically, "don't you care? Mom's living with some stranger in a tent, and it's all over the internet." I tried to stay calm. "If it upsets you, stay off the internet, Daddy. My friends keep sending me links to the blog. It's disgusting. You have to do something." I promised her I would, honey, I will. After leaving countless voicemails, I finally reached Dawn. "Sorry, Anthony, things have been chaotic here," she said, "but Dawn, you haven't returned my calls." I was the one who reached out. I pointed out that you can't imagine what's going on here. No one is listening to my problems. She replied, "If no one is listening, don't share your problems." I suggested that 20% don't care and the other 80% are glad it's not happening to them. "Well, Anthony, you don't get it. There are thousands of people here, from regular folks to celebrities." She said, "That's great, Dawn. Any other mothers who have left their families?" I asked. "Don't be sarcastic, Anthony. You're making it sound like I care more about toiletries than my family." She replied, "Dawn, toilet paper is a basic necessity. I'm not being sarcastic. How can I and the kids be your priority when you're with another guy?" I asked, "Don't be naive, Anthony. We're just sharing a tent. We don't sleep together." She insisted. "Dawn, let me read you something from your tentmate's blog. Yesterday's entry was called Occupying Umil Muff, which I started." Dawn cut me off before I could finish. "Anthony, you can't believe everything you read on the internet. He just makes things up to get attention. When an unemployed immigrant living in a tent with my wife describes the birthmark on your thigh, I believe the rest of what he says. I've arranged for us to see a highly recommended marriage therapist. I insisted that I wasn't going to let some backwoods Bible-thumping redneck tell me that I had to submit to you and stay home. She countered, Dawn. That's not what I'm saying. You need to come home right now. I insisted that I couldn't. This is important to me. When my mom said it was important to learn to swim, they threw me in the lake. That's how I learned. She replied. I replied, have you ever thought that maybe they did not want to teach you to swim? I looked at my watch and said, there's a bus leaving at midnight with your name on it, and if you're not on it, I'm filing for divorce. I heard Dawn talking to someone as she covered the phone. Anthony, I can't leave now. I'm deeply involved in this movement. Dawn, don't confuse movement with action. Running around in circles gets you nowhere, no matter how big the circle. I replied, are you just going to leave me? Dawn exclaimed. I felt confused. I replied, Dawn, you left me with the kids on the bus. Then, as expected, I hung up. Dawn didn't take the bus. I didn't hear from her until a week later. Anthony, how could you? Dawn yelled over the phone. You're filing for divorce, claiming desertion. You cut off my cell phone. I had to borrow a phone to call you. That's why I didn't recognize the number and those horrible pictures you attached to the divorce papers. Dawn continued. Was that necessary? What if the kids saw them? I wasn't surprised by her reaction, and I told her so. Now you're worried about the children. Just so you know, the kids found the pictures. Your roommate, who you said you had nothing to do with, posted them on his blog, and your daughter heard about them from classmates. I just printed them out. Anthony, I'm sorry, I swear. I didn't know he was taking pictures. I got caught up in the moment where we were all fighting for the same thing, and I made a mistake. How long did that moment last? Last dawn, I sent you 7 pictures, each with a timestamp from 7 consecutive nights. Okay, Anthony, sleeping with him wasn't the smartest move, but in my defense, it was just a guy. Dawn explained that I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How does the number of partners matter? With all the background noise? I strained to hear Dawn's answer. Anthony, you have to put this in perspective. Is my mistake worth losing everything? Our marriage doesn't have to end over this. Many couples have gone through worse and come out stronger. This event could actually make our marriage stronger. Dawn, this is as confusing as when Yogi Berra said that if you don't go to other people's funerals, they won't come to yours. As I adjusted the phone, Dawn continued, listen, I've got a guy here who's connected. His father owns a large law firm in the state. He says you'll be destroyed in court if you keep pushing for this divorce. Amid the noise, a man's voice took over the phone. Hello. Can you hear me, Anthony? Yes, I can. I answered. Buddy, you are handling this all wrong. The voice said, I'm from a big law firm, and I've seen guys like you get crushed by the courts every day. If I represent your wife, you're going down. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? This conversation felt strange. Sorry, I don't know who your father is. Maybe your mother didn't tell you. The voice on the other end stuttered. Calmly, I replied, maybe your mother has had relationships with so many men that it's hard to tell who your father is. I'm here to help if you need it. Do you have any features that suggest African American, Hispanic, or Asian ancestry? The man yelled. My family has been in this country since it was a colony. Why are you so upset? I asked honestly, I'm just trying to help. Besides, I wasn't the one whose mother had multiple partners before you were born. Maybe you should check to see if she was living near a military base when you were conceived. The government keeps a DNA database, so you could confirm who your mom used as a sperm donor. I'll destroy you in court. I heard the guy yell earlier. Dawn must have taken the phone from him. Anthony, are you still there? Dawn asked. Yes, I'm here. Dawn, are you sure you want this guy to represent you in our divorce? He seems pretty unstable, probably because he's insecure about his father. Forget him. Forget this divorce. Dawn said that everyone cheats at least once in their marriage. It's not a big deal anymore. You're wrong, Dawn. A recent Gallup poll found that 91% of Americans think it's morally wrong to have an affair. Only 9% think it's okay. Divorce may be more accepted now, but adultery is still considered immoral in most states. Damn it, Anthony, divorce isn't the answer, Dawn. There are no right answers to wrong questions. Fine, you want to fight, Dawn spit. I'll beat you at it. Remember, those who live by the sword die by the sword. The sword. What does cutlery have to do with our divorce, Dawn? Besides, these days, those who live by the sword get shot by those who don't. I heard more cursing before the line went dead. One thing was clear. Dawn came out ahead in the divorce, and her lawyer made sure I left with almost nothing. Our state's alimony laws worked in her favor, and her lawyer used that to take my retirement savings, home equity, and cash. But I didn't mind losing those material things because I got sole custody of our children in return. Dawn may have won the battle, but it felt like an empty victory to me. Dawn's involvement in the Wall Street protests got her some attention, even a book deal and a movie contract. My daughter showed me the press release, and it explained why Dawn wasn't pushing for child support, but it didn't make sense why she was draining my accounts and claiming she couldn't afford child support. Her newfound fame brought a little scorn from our small town, which caught me off guard. Even my coworkers treated me differently. Janet, a single mother and coworker, shed some light on the situation. You may not see it, Anthony, but there's still a lot of old-fashioned thinking here, especially about dealing with women. Janet said. But what could I have done differently? I asked. This mess wasn't my doing? Janet patted me sympathetically on the shoulder. I understand. Anthony, your ex-wife, Dawn, seems a little off. With all the therapy and medication out there, I bet a quarter of the women in this country are dealing with some kind of mental problem. I think about her words, so that means 3/4 are walking around untreated. Janet suddenly taps me on the shoulder and grumbles that we are all the same. I rubbed my sore shoulder and continued. I don't care what they think, and what does my personal life have to do with my job? Anyway, at the bank, trust is key. If you can't handle your own family, people wonder how you're going to manage their money. Janet explained that she may have been right, but my family came first. The bank job was just a way to support them. However, it did cause some problems at work. Some clients avoided me because they were afraid my personal problems would rub off on them. Then one day the manager surprised me. Tomorrow you're in charge, he said. Keep the staff in line. The next morning, I arrived early to greet my team. After a quick tour and a stop at the restroom, I walked out to a shocking scene. Masked men were terrorizing my staff, and one of them was holding explosives over my head. Are you the damn manager? One of them shouted. I am the manager for now, I said, remembering my robbery training. If you're here for cash, we'll give it to you. Otherwise, come back when we're open. The perpetrator grabbed my tie and waved the dangerous device. "Stop the jokes, idiot." He pushed me down, struggling with my tie. I slowly got up. I hated these things. They started in Croatia a long time ago as a sign of loyalty to the king. Why we still wear them is a mystery. I kept my hands up, as I was trained to do, and addressed the perpetrator. "We don't want any trouble. I'll get you the money. No need for violence, you better." He threw a bag containing 1 million in cash to the tellers. Remembering my training, I didn't argue. I'd love to, but we're a small branch. We only get $7,000 a week, and that bag won't hold $1 million. "What the hell are you talking about?" 22.2. 6 pounds? I explained that each doll 100 bill weighs 1 gram with 1,000 bills in $1 million. That's 22.2. 6 pounds, but we don't have that much. The perpetrator pulled Janet from the teller line and held her hostage with a dangerous device to her head. I only dealt with these things in video games, so I couldn't tell if it was fragmentation high explosive or phosphorus, but it seemed unusual. "Listen, manager." The perpetrator demanded my attention. "Give me all the money in this bank now, or I'll blow her head off." "Okay," I said, moving toward the vault. "The money is still in there." Then he let go, pushing Janet toward the bag, causing her to fall into the vault past the safes. We huddled behind the barred door, and the robber left with the bag. The perpetrator blocked our exit, and then unexpectedly threw the device into the vault. "Goodbye, suckers," he yelled as he ran off. Time seemed to slow down as the device rolled toward Janet. I heard screams and saw a cashier faint. Remembering I was in charge, I dropped to grab it, feeling like I was moving through syrup, but managed to catch it. I knocked Janet down and ran for the vault exit, feeling like I was running through thick mud. It seemed to take forever, but I finally made it out and slammed the vault door shut with my foot. I knew the sturdy old door would protect everyone inside from the blast. But in front of me, the barred door to the vault was closed, trapping me inside with a device that detected an open vault. We used it for demos. I stuffed it in and closed the lid tightly, grabbing the box with my left hand. I pushed it into an open slot in the wall filled with other boxes. Then everything exploded into blinding light, and I was thrown backward over the counter as my vision cleared. My ears were ringing and my body felt like it was covered in bees. Janet was kneeling in front of me, her lips moving but no sound coming out. She pulled off my tie and used it to wrap my left hand. I looked up and saw a hole where I'd put the device. Smoke filled the room and my face was sweaty, so I wiped my brow with my hand. I saw that it was covered in blood. More of the staff gathered around, but I still couldn't hear them. I tried to get up, but I felt too heavy. Janet motioned for me to stay down, then began to remove her blouse. Her perfume was a relief from the smell of tow powder, and I tried to guess the scent. When I blacked out, the fog slowly lifted from my mind, and I realized I was lying in a hospital bed. Bandages were wrapped around my left hand and foot. A doctor in a white coat stood nearby, scribbling notes on a chart. "Welcome back, Rambo," the doctor said casually, not bothering to look up. "I've removed a lot of shrapnel from your face and scalp, but you're going to be fine." He pointed his pen at me. "You also lost a few fingers and your thumb," he went on, "but luckily there was enough of your thumb left to transplant your big toe onto your hand. With some rehab, you'll regain about 80 to 85% range of motion in that hand, although I doubt you'll be tickling the ivories at Carnegie Hall anytime soon." I was confused, "Doc. I've never played the piano before, let alone at Carnegie Hall." The doctor just shrugged. Good thing someone used your tie to stop the bleeding. That quick thinking might have saved your life." With that, he hung up my chart and left the room. I felt someone move on the other side of the bed and saw the bank manager standing there. "Anthony, you crazy son of a witch," he said, shaking his head. "I never thought you'd pull off a stunt like that." The security cameras caught it all. It looked like a scene out of a Bruce Willis diary movie. He ran his hand through his hair. "You know, Anthony, we're all pretty proud of you and what you've done, and well, we all feel bad about how you've been treated lately with the divorce and all." There was an awkward silence before the bank manager tried to change the subject by clapping his hands together. "Of course you're not the only one we're proud of," he said, pointing behind him. "Janet here slipped a couple of dice packs into the rover's bag." Those fools were looking inside when the packs blew up, covering her and the entire windshield with DY. They lost control of the car and crashed into the Creamtime Dutch shop. He chuckled. "Those idiots got busted by every cop in the county." I tried to grin, but my face felt funny. The bank manager turned to Janet. "Hey, Janet, I got to get back to work. Can you keep an eye on Anthony for me?" He squeezed my shoulder. "Take all the time you need, Anthony. The banks cover everything, and we're all damn proud of you." After the manager left, Janet spoke. "Your kids are at the Sitters with mine. They're having a blast being the local heroes' kids." She closed the door before coming over to my bed, a half smile on her face as she said, "A die-hard scene. Anthony, more like die stupid. You do realize that was a flash bomb, not a real explosive device." "It was an M84 flash device," I interjected, realizing what had happened. "Standard issue, 2/3 of a pound, packed with magnesium and ammonium." Janet shook her head. "I don't know about all that, but if you hadn't gone all action hero, we'd have a bunch of ringing ears." I looked down at the bandages on my hand. Yes, by trapping the explosion in the locker, I had turned a harmless bang into a real explosion. I knew I hadn't meant to put everyone in danger, but I still felt stupid. "Sorry, Janet, I never meant to endanger the bank or its employees." Janet grinned at me. "Forget the bank. They love the attention and you're my hero. I don't take my clothes off for just anybody." You know, she wiped her lipstick off my mouth. "They all need a piece of humble pie for the way they treated you. I got some friends in the sheriff's office. They're spitting it like he defused a real bomb. They won't admit it was a flashbang, but they won't deny it either." I pointed with my good hand, but Janet doesn't want the truth to come out in court. She chuckled. "These idiots took a plea bargain. They won't admit it was a flashbang. It's better for their reputation in prison if everyone thinks they were big shots. Using a glorified firecracker doesn't sound so tough. Enjoy the hero status. Hell, you might even be the town's parade marshal this year." I shrugged, feeling uncomfortable but too exhausted to care. Janet squeezed my thigh. "And you owe me a blouse. Plus the bank owes you some money and I'm collecting." I never got to buy Janet that blouse. She refused to take any money, even for taking care of my children while I was in the hospital. "Keep your money, Anthony," Janet insisted when I tried to pay her back. "The boys always keep each other busy, and your daughter is like the daughter I always wanted." I knew better than to argue, but I made a mental note to start a college fund for their children. As we pulled up to Janet's house, I was surprised to see a fancy limousine parked outside. My surprise grew when I saw my ex-wife Dawn and another woman on the porch. Janet mumbled something about a village missing its idiot as she helped me out of the car. Dawn and a serious-looking woman stayed on the porch as Dawn helped me up the driveway. "Oh my God," Dawn exclaimed as she reached for me. I flew here as fast as I could and got a limo. I stood still as Dawn hugged me, as she let go and stepped back to look at me. I noticed something in her eyes. I've never been a big fan of the whole health craze. Unlike a lot of newly divorced guys, I hadn't jumped into an intense workout routine, and my desk job wasn't doing much for my waistline either. Anthony, Dawn told me to poke my stomach. I've got a new diet plan that will shape you up in no time. I wasn't in the mood for a lecture on eating vegetables from dawn till dusk. The diet industry thrives on a 98% failure rate. Most people regain all the weight they lose, even after losing pounds. And as for fighting shape, I'm already too heavy to walk away from a fight. Dawn tried to laugh it off. You're hilarious, but a little exercise will do wonders for you. My hand was throbbing, and I was exhausted. If walking or cycling were the key to immortality, male carriers would live forever. A whale swims all day, eats fish, drinks water, and stays fat. A rabbit runs and hops, but lives only 15 years. A turtle does nothing but lives up to 450 years. So why should I start exercising again? Dawn looked at Janet. Standing nearby, it looks like you've inherited your aversion to exercise from her, she remarked, possibly taking a jab at Janet's figure. Janet narrowed her eyes and snapped. You know, there's plenty of evidence that women who carry a few extra pounds tend to live longer than the skinny ones, who obsess about being overweight and end up in fights. The stern woman next to Dawn stepped forward to shake my hand. Hello, Anthony. I'm Dawn's publicist. We were all excited about this opportunity, but Dawn cut her off. What a perfect way to end my story. I will nurse you back to health, and we will all be reunited as a family. The publicist nodded enthusiastically. The Lifetime channel was thrilled when we pitched them the idea. We might even make it into a series. There I was. This could mean a lot of money and fame for me. No, I said calmly, and clearly what Dawn and her publicist were saying at the same time. No, I repeated. What part of no didn't you understand? The publicist went into damage control mode. Anthony, I'm on your side here, so you need to listen to Dawn. I shook my head. No matter what the argument, there's always someone on your side that you wish was on the other side. The publicist acted as if I hadn't spoken. I know you've been through a lot lately, and you may not be thinking clearly. The recent head injury and the shock of your and Dawn's separation may have clouded your judgment. You should really consider this. It's not every day that something like this comes your way. Janet grabbed my arm to lead me to the door before she turned to the publicist. In that case, you'd better call before you come over. We wouldn't want to mistake you for an opportunity. Knock. Dawn stepped in front of me. Anthony, stop. What are you doing? We belong together. You need me. You know you won't find anyone else like me. I stared at them for a while. Dawn, this doesn't even make sense. I don't even like you. Why would I want to find someone remotely like you? Dawn tried another approach. Things aren't the same anymore, Anthony. Her words made me cringe as she continued. This is going to be a best-selling book on a national TV show. Do you really want to be painted as the bad guy? I mean, if I walk off this porch when I'm done telling the story, even the dog will hate you. That's not true, Dawn. The dog won't care. Dawn turned to Janet. You're one of those Bible-thumping believers, aren't you? Isn't there something in Corinthians or Genesis about forgiveness or something that can help me out here? Janet let go of my arm to face Dawn and her publicist. Well, I don't have any Bible verses for you, but I do have one that might help Anthony. She looked at Dawn and gestured toward the street. Get out of my house." Then Janet turned and winked at me. This is from Exodus. Dawn and the publicist were taken aback. "You can't talk to me like that," Dawn stuttered. Janet walked me to the door and spoke without looking back. "I'd shoot you both in the head, but it'd only be a scratch. We'll see what the sheriff has to say about your threats this time." Janet turned around and held out her cell phone. "Uncle Bob, the town sheriff is number 6 on speed dial." When Dawn and the publicist didn't answer the phone, Janet continued, "I have a loaded Magnum, 8 acres of land, and a shovel. Don't mess with me or the people I care about." I limped through the door as Janet closed it behind me. Dawn's book ended up in the store pretty quickly, and her movie did well. It didn't even make it straight to video. To her credit, her 15 minutes of fame were short-lived. She tried to visit the children when she had time. We could tell how her career was going by the type of transportation she used when she came in limousines that turned into town cars, then taxis, and finally shared shuttles. Dawn still came each visit with gifts and stories of projects and developments. The last time she came to town, she was with a washed-up actor driving a beat-up old Mercedes. My son saw her latest production, a cheesy, low-budget reality show way up on the cable channels. Janet joked that Dawn suffered from a bland look at us. "What's that?" I asked, and Janet explained that it's a made-up condition where people seek attention without actually accomplishing anything. They end up on obscure cable channels in the middle of the night and then fade into obscurity, appearing only occasionally in ads for personal hygiene products or reverse mortgages. Dawn deserves our sympathy and maybe 7 seconds of our attention. The kids thought it was funny, so I don't think Janet was serious or that Bapaz Lucas is a real thing. Meeting Janet's brother was a pleasant surprise. He's also on the autism spectrum, which explains a lot about her understanding. Eventually Janet and I got together. It just made sense since we had so much in common, and combining our families and resources allowed us to live a typical middle-income life. The kids adore Janet, and so do I. I was even invited to ride on the main float in the Founders' Day parade. People often think you need money to be rich, but I've learned that being rich doesn't always mean having lots of money. It's not what you have, but who you have with you.